Good morning. This is Dan Salerno coming to you on behalf of Documentary Business. I'd like to welcome Peter Hamilton and Liz Levinson today for another one of Documentary Business's reviews of the markets. I think we've made a pretty good habit of coming to you following the various conferences, MIPS and MIPCOMs and Real Screens and so forth. So first, I want to start off by welcoming Peter and allowing me to moderate, and Peter sort of sit in the guest role this morning. And welcome back, Liz. Liz, I think this is your third or fourth appearance with us, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this is getting to be a fun way to sort of look back on how the market was and look forward to what the future has.
Well, great. Well, why don't we get started? For those of you who are sort of first-time viewers or joiners of our conversations, Peter is the editor and publisher of Documentary Business, which is a fantastic look at all things factual, all things nonfiction, and you can find it at documentarybusiness.com. Liz Levinson is an international sales executive and consultant who is representing GRB in the international sales marketplace and has extensive experience over the last 2 decades. She started when she was very, very young, probably in elementary school, I believe. And Liz is also the co-founder and partner of Cactus Tree Entertainment, which had a presence with your partner there at MIPCOM as well. So appreciate sort of the veteran look at MIPCOM is going on, I believe it's now its 40th year, if I'm not mistaken, rather established. It's sort of the surviving MIP market. As we all know, when we did this review about 6 months ago, MIP was sort of having its swan song goodbye, and we had a little bit of a toast for that. But now MIPCOM is here. It sort of is, it's back up and felt good from both of your perspectives. If before we get into the takeaways, just the vibe itself, Peter, you had said that it felt really good this time around on the Quasette.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and thank you for hosting our webinar. It's great to have you back, Liz. You're always so full of insights. So my first meeting at MIPCOM was with Liz.
Oh,
and we met at the Carlton and we were anticipating what was the market going to be like. Would it be relatively flat like MIP TV, or would we actually find progress and optimism there? My experience was that the vibe was definitely up. You bring more than 10,000 delegates together, hundreds of buyers, and conversations happen, stuff happens, particularly because we had beautiful weather in Cannes this time. And so I came away from it feeling that there was a shift. The previous market was, how do we survive till 25? And I think there was much more optimism about how we get stuff done. Let's face the reality of the market. Let's work out how to buy, sell, get our projects done. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter. As someone who is based in Los Angeles and very much, in the weeds with the production and distribution communities here in LA, I felt that MIPCOM was such a breath of fresh air. There has been a lot of doom and gloom in LA lately. I think anybody who's based in LA would agree with me on that. And I felt that MIPCOM for me was really sort of a litmus test of where was the market going. And I actually said to somebody prior to going, if I can come away from MIPCOM feeling optimistic about the business, that would be a win for me. And I truly felt that. And I don't know if it was that because fewer people attended MIP TV and everybody decided that MIPCOM was the place to go. I don't know if it was that, or, there is some kind of rebounding of the industry as a whole. But either way, I thought the vibe was very positive. The market floor felt, not crowded, but busy. And the meetings were very high quality. So I was very, very happy with being there.
Okay.
Well, it really is. I will tell you from this side of the ocean and following it through, our regular reports, both of you, we were texting throughout the event and in sort of keeping up with the daily trades. I definitely felt the same vibe from 4,000 miles away. It's rather refreshing, in a year where we've all talked about consolidation and contraction. But, with that in mind and sort of that nice sort of positive feel, there were probably a few things beyond just, it felt good. Liz, what was one of the sort of takeaways, if you will, maybe that we could help start this conversation a little bit?
Sure, and I think one of the biggest takeaways that we've been talking about, you and I, Dan, and Peter as well, is co-productions. So partnerships among producers, countries, broadcasters, and I think that for an American producer, co-productions have become increasingly more and more important as everybody's trying to figure out how to get projects financed. To me, it seemed like there was a lot of conversation around co-production. I think Peter might have had a slightly different perspective, but in a very interesting way. As the market has been evolving, the opportunities for co-productions become very specific, and I think they have to be very targeted. So, attending a market like this, I think, is very important because you get to know the broadcasters, the distributors, and who's funding what. And I think that the future is very bright for co-productions. It's very important, but it's not going to be an easy road.
That's really interesting, Liz. And I guess my takeaway is the vibe was good, and you've got to be at the market in order to develop the relationships that are going to create the opportunities for co-productions. So attendance at the market, is as it's a big mantra on documentary business. Get out of Dodge and go to a market, and that's how you discover your co-production relationships. Dan, do you want me to share my thoughts on co-productions? Because I have a really interesting qualifier.
Yeah, by all means. That's what we're here for.
So I met with a couple of buyers for the European platforms, or the European operations of global streaming platforms. And both of them surprised me by saying that their emphasis now in Europe is on local. In other words, if they're targeting Czech Republic, they want Czech programming with Czech hosts in Czech language on Czech subjects. And they prioritize that over and above, let's say, a generic co-production, which is then dubbed into Czech language. And it's the more generic co-production, say, between a German network, I'm making up an example, or a French network, and say PBS. Those kind of projects, therefore, have to be better. If the platforms themselves can substitute, more generic lifestyle and lower cost, local programs. So that was a really, really important takeaway for me. And it also speaks to the importance of the big public broadcasters. They still have huge budgets, Germany, France in particular. And so there's still a very active pipeline there. But it's going to come under pressure if the streamers aren't available, and as the big public broadcasters lose audiences. So there's a kind of a wrinkle to the future, which I'm still getting my mind around, to tell you the truth, Liz and Dan.
I just want to jump in. I totally agree, Peter. And when I embark on a co-production project, when I take on a project, for me, it has to have an organic connection to whatever a country or a location, whether that's in the story that it's telling or the talent that's involved in it. It has to have that proprietary piece that would make it so that it's a global story, but a local story. And I think a few years ago, when we were the markets were sort of coming back after COVID, the term that I heard, the buzzword, was global. So global story, local content. And I think that's becoming increasingly important on the co-production side, that there has to be this element where you are telling a global story, but you're telling something with a very local specific connection. And that's my particular co-production slate for sure. And I think a lot of that local content, that drive for more local content, has been very interesting on the format side. GRB Media Ranch has an extensive format catalog, and we have been, looking at certain territories to launch formats in, and that's a very interesting conversation right now, because that checks the box for local content while still giving the local buyers an understanding that here's a proven show that has worked before in other territories. How do we work with them to make it, a slam dunk for their territory in particular? So that's driven a lot of those format conversations lately as well.
Yeah, I think formats are popping up a little bit more and more for the reasons that Peter described with the interest in local. I do think it's a fascinating and an ongoing conversation that we've all had in both as one-on-ones and in two-on-ones here, where I think there's a supply and demand sort of settling out that is still getting worked out, and co-pros are one way to get there because it's about sort of budget contraction, but yet there's still going to be an appetite for content. What I've been hearing, and I think Peter, you've been hearing a bit too from some of these larger distributors, is that the U.S. market's contraction is having sort of a trickle down effect into the international market, that you can't count on the U.S. to be a partner in nonfiction. You've got to find a way to do it, usually out of European public broadcasters and global sales. And there's sort of a settling in that we're still going through in this evolution from linear to streaming, that we're not quite there yet.
That's definitely the case, Dan. So one of the projects that I was really working at MIPCOM is a blue chip wildlife story. It's a co-production between Terramata Studios, Silver Bullet, a South African production company, and PBS Nature involved. So there's an example of one of those kind of rare projects that tells a really compelling story in a fascinating location that appeals to the European market and has a European driver, but also has a very hard to get spot on the PBS Nature schedule. So, I mean, that's talk about threading the needle, so.
It very much is. It's, in one of the conversations recently that I've had with, another contributor to Documentary Business, was speaking a little bit about the appetite for natural history in the European marketplace. And if you add up sort of a lot of the, particularly coming out of Germany, a lot of what the public broadcasters are contributing to, there's as much as 50 plus hours just coming out of there alone. Now, the hard part is that are there enough co-production partners outside of Germany to support 50 hours? And I think that's where we're gonna see some of this. But one of the solutions that always is we're always looking for sort of new venues, new platforms, and so forth. And as we start to figure out, we go from commissions to co-pros to partnerships, and who can we partner with? The big topic about a year ago was fast channels. And, they were all the rage. The volume has increased, the numbers increased. Players out there with Blue Ant, Pluto, Samsung TV Plus with Jen Batty coming out of Europe has really made an impact on the market. We're a year later, and, we're kind of past that honeymoon period. How are the fast channels doing? What was it like this year at MIPCOM? I know, Liz, probably in your role with GRB, you're talking to fast channels quite a bit as an opportunity for sales.
Yeah, absolutely. And fast channels, I think the concept of a fast channel has been around for a while. I mean, I think probably we're probably 10 years into the development of some of these channels. For me, on the sales side, fast channels have become as much of a partner as broadcast and linear networks. When I am evaluating who I'm speaking to in a territory about a certain project, I'm always on the lookout to see if there's a fast channel that might be a great partner. In some cases, it's purely a revenue share deal, as I think a lot of fast channels are. In other cases, there are fast channels that are buying exclusive rights to content. I think there's some conversations that are starting to happen, around the original production side of things for fast. And so one of my biggest market takeaways was just the evolution and increasing sophistication of the fast channel industry and market. We're seeing fast channels that have full programming teams, ad sales teams, PR and marketing, which is great because it's giving audiences an opportunity to find fairly niche content that is that they might not be able to find on another broadcaster, because another broadcaster has decided, hey, we don't have enough of an audience for this, but fast channels can really target very specific audiences. So I think it's very interesting. I know, Dan, we've spoken about how many fast channels there are, especially within the US and North America. I don't know how sustainable that is, but I do think that it's not a trend that is, going to come and go. This is a real part of the business that I think will continue to evolve to the point that it's going to look like linear cable networks sort of all over again. And so much of this industry is very cyclical, and we see a lot of the same trends emerging and reemerging. And I think fast channels are definitely part of that.
And do you think, as a seller, if you could put your selling hat on, have fast channels hit a point for you where one of the things that I would hear about a year ago was the first stop for a seller was still the linear service or the streaming service. And after you sort of kind of ran through your options there, you then might call the fast service up, or the AVOD in a particular territory. Are they still kind of, your third phone call, or are they starting to move up the ladder here a little bit and be on an even playing field with some of the linear platforms?
I'll tell you, as a seller, when I'm evaluating, who I'm going to speak to in a territory, it really is a case by case basis, depending on the show. In a lot of cases, in most cases, as a seller, you want to find the right partner for that show, that's going to, one, return the most revenue, and two, find the right audience so that the future of the show could potentially grow. So it really depends on the project itself. If I'm selling a very specific genre, and I know that there's a big fast channel that operates in that genre, I'm absolutely going to speak to them because they're going to be the right home for it. Yeah, it really just depends.
Well, I think it's great. It is definitely one of the things that, we run hot and cold as an industry, right? Yesterday's trend is not always today's sort of activity. And it's nice to see fast channels are starting to sort of survive, if you will, and not just sort of be a flash in the pan.
Dan, I'm actually, I know the industry runs hot and cold. I came away lukewarm about fast channels.
Okay.
And remember, a fast channel is a free advertiser-supported online channel. So it's a free Netflix, if you wish. And as Liz points out, there are hundreds of them, and they've basically all launched off the back of the archive, the distributor's archive and the producer's archive. They've got hundreds of hours on I don't know, fat bears or airline crashes or whatever the subject is. And there are people who really are very happy to see loops of this kind of programming on their connected TVs. So the challenge for me that I'm still trying to think this through, obviously, but felt it very much at MIPCOM, is that just as in the early days of Discovery, Dan, when you were at the helm there, audiences get sick of the archive. They get bored with it. They can only see the archive so many times, and they've got to refresh their programs. They've got to refresh their lineup with new programs. If these hundreds of fast channels have micro audiences, not the 1% of the audience that maybe Discovery or Nat Geo might have had, in the linear TV days, but a fraction of that, how are they possibly going to be able to pay for programming? And I think we run the risk of a real shakeout here. And it's going to be really interesting to see which players are able to afford to stay in the game, to commission the new programs that are going to enrich their brands and keep the audiences coming back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Peter. And there's a nuance to it that we could probably do an entire webinar on, right? With it does come back to the business model, and it is very sort of parallel to the beginning days of cable, where we were all reruns. We were all about somebody else's library, and it wasn't until the viewers kind of said, "Hey, been there, done that, kind of seen that. Give me something new." Fast channels, I think, are going to go through that experience, and that's when we're going to see a culling of sort of the volume. I think the last numbers I saw, which are now like 6 months old, there was, in the US alone, there were over 2,000 unique fast channels, not even the ones that sort of, you can find the monsters on 3 different, sort of platforms. But, with that in mind, you think about, Peter, you talk about sort of really, in a way, you've got to go from library content to new content. in order to kind of sustain your the interest of the viewer. The people who do that the best, and wasn't really on our on my agenda to talk about today, but is YouTube. And YouTube is the number one service. Even this morning in a discussion I had with somebody, the number one service in television, even if you take away tablets and everything else, in almost every territory. How was there a presence of YouTube even in the conversations you guys had at MIPCOM? Was there any discussions about it, or is that sort of still the kind of the older brother that is dominating the market, but nobody really wants to kind of own up to?
So YouTube is definitely a big part of the conversation now, and it's part of the conversation in terms of monetizing content. So as a distributor, I work with a library of content. YouTube is the biggest AVOD platform in the world by far. So to reach the most eyeballs, YouTube is definitely a target. So it can be used for marketing purposes. It can also be used for revenue purposes. And, we're actively trying to figure out what the YouTube strategy is for certain properties in the GRB Media Ranch catalog. But also I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to combine, marketing a show, getting a few episodes out there, and also making revenue on that. So YouTube is absolutely part of the conversation.
Yeah, Peter, did you have a similar experience?
It's a really good question, and I would just add that everybody wishes they were YouTube or had some version of the YouTube model. I mean, just look at them.
It is a phenomena, and it's a phenomena, but it's not like it came out of nowhere. It's been building and building, and it's almost like we have chosen not to pay as close attention to it as maybe we probably should.
It's a really good question though, Dan, and we're still working it out. In a sense, it's Netflix weren't there either at the market, so when you take those two big players off the table, but yet there's 10,000 delegates all hope to be able to do deals or to emulate the financial models of a YouTube or a Netflix or sell to them, whatever. It's just a characteristic of the market right now.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that YouTube, I think, is forcing, and Peter, it's an area that you've spoken a little bit about. Is YouTube is the resources required to put together your programming in your content for YouTube. They're not as great as what they are with a traditional linear terrestrial channel, cable channel, streaming service, et cetera. That as you've described, the budget sweet spots are starting to fall back as the appetite for volume is going up. You want to speak a little bit about what your experience is, particularly there in Cannes, with kind of watching this moving target of sort of affordability for both buyers and sellers?
That's good, Dan. The budget question, and I want to come back to a really wonderful and much complimented webinar that you did with the producers of Destruction Decoded a few weeks ago. There's a company that anticipated with cord cutting and the loss of distribution, and therefore the loss of both subscription revenues and advertising revenues in the linear business, and the lack of equivalent development of revenue streams on the digital side, that prices were going to fall. And so big media developed a suite of programs. I think they've got up to nearly 100 series now. And a suite of program based on a much lower production model. And their philosophy was, okay, let's launch at this price point 5 years ago and wait for the market to come down to us. And guess what? They did.
It did.
So definitely budgets are under pressure. And with, coming back to the PBS, the classic PBS blue chip, high-end curated documentary, the public broadcasters are feeling the same pressure, and their budget points are coming down. And I think, you've asked me privately about the role of AI in this whole discussion. And I think the key takeaway for me about AI is that as production budgets come down, AI is increasingly looked at not as some technical fantasy box, but as a tool for streamlining production processes and lowering costs. And that's why there was so much attention to it. Did you notice that, Liz?
Yeah, the conversations about AI, from my perspective, have been on two fronts. One is the lowering of production costs. So, essentially, you can use AI to do a recreation for you without having to have a set or hire actors. So there is a big cost savings. For me, what I'm seeing the most with AI is conversations about localization and dubbing. There's a lot of conversations about, can AI seamlessly help distributors localize their content into local language. Right now, the price points are about equal with an AI dubbing company and a regular dubbing company. I think we will start to see the technology get better and better, and the costs get lower and lower. We're not quite there yet, but you can see the makings of AI being very, very seamless with that process.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
reckon
it is. It's very much, I can, as we've been looking a lot into AI lately, just as part of our regular sort of client services, and it's mostly behind the scenes right now. It's started creeping up a little closer to the screen itself. But its biggest opportunity with the sales and distribution world is the languaging, for sure. And I've actually spoken to a couple of distributors in Europe that are using it quite extensively. And I think what it does is it opens up markets to them that, a sale in, name the small territory that they could only get $500 out of. Now they can afford to actually work with that territory because they can just make a language version, and they don't have to go through all of the expenses. But Liz, as you've sort of explored, the ability of the market to absorb, budgets that are big, budgets that are small, wider in some cases with volumes and so forth. I get the sense that, there is not just an appetite, but almost we got to have it under six figures now in a lot of these instances, particularly when we start to get into digital platforms, that, the looking for projects in the nonfiction space under $100,000 is not the rarity that it once was. And it's becoming more and more a way to enter the market and a way to stay relevant in the market. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We spoke about YouTube. People are producing for, we're talking hundreds of dollars and getting millions and millions of views. So we're competing now for the same eyeballs. So obviously the revenues are going to fall, the budgets are going to fall. And I think there's sort of an increased interest in, customization, being able to find content that very much suits the niche that you want to watch in. And, like you said, Dan, even with the fast channels, the audience numbers might not be as big, so the revenue won't be as big, but that audience still demands content. So the only way to create that content is to lower your price point and lower that entry point. So yeah, I mean, that's going to keep being a factor. So as that continues, as producers, we have to come up with new ways to supplement that. And that might look like a sponsorship. That might look like filming in a state or a country that gives you a really amazing tax credit. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to help pad those budgets up a little bit so we can get that money back on screen to get the highest quality production that we can for that new reduced budget.
Yeah.
But Dan, it's
ahead,
a
Peter.
really important point to end on budgets, because I know we're running out of time. And Dan, can I insert a couple of plugs before we finish?
Yeah, I was going to say we're running a little bit over, but any sort of final thoughts? Peter, we'll go ahead and see what you've got. Something maybe we didn't get to cover in depth here.
I just wanted to foreshadow that Ludo Dufour from Curiosity Stream gave a really detailed presentation that I was happy to moderate. And we're going to follow up with a webinar in the next couple of weeks with Ludo. And also I moderated a panel for a really wonderful animated film that was really rooted in factual research called Survivor. And it was a Holocaust survival story I'll also write that up on my newsletter and really recommend that folks take a look at that. And that's
Yeah, and actually, Peter, that's a great point. I apologize, I didn't include that in the introduction there. That a lot of your presence at MIPCOM is also built around the opportunity to share your thoughts and your insights in these panel discussions. And I think for veterans of MIP and MIPCOM, we sometimes forget that there's a really good slate of panels and workshops and so forth that now RX is offering at these events. And we should probably make sure those don't go unnoticed, because they can be quite valuable for producers, distributors from not just the sort of the US and European territories, but really globally. And I know, with the shameless plug for the newsletter, I know you've outlined several of these over the years in the newsletter, and they're fantastic reads. So I would encourage anybody here that's joining us to take the time to engage in those as well.
Thank you, Dan.
Liz, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see where markets go in the future. And I mean that about markets as a whole. I think everybody I spoke to agreed that while MIPCOM is alive and well and bustling, it's also exhausting. Everyone is racing around and trying to get to their next meeting. It's a half-hour meeting format, so everyone's always running late. I had a lot of people say to me that they're starting to prefer smaller regional markets because you have more time with everybody. You actually get to build a relationship over an hour or a drink or a coffee instead of racing one meeting to another. So I think just keeping an eye on where the market industry itself goes is going to be interesting as we get into next year and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As all three of us have talked at various times, C21 is becoming very active with their content fill in the region activities. Brunico's relationship with NAPI is spawning some consolidation and some expansion as well. And then, we turn around and things like webinars and Zooms and even free content on YouTube that discusses things. You do get to, if you are a small independent distributor where you've got to keep an eye on your bottom line, the cost of going to a market versus maybe conducting some virtual sessions is definitely something on your mind. So I think we're all curious. We love the travel and the locations, but we also need an ROI like everybody else. Well, thank you very much, Peter. Again, thank you for allowing me to host as you sort of sit in the guest chair for this one. And Liz, thank you again for joining us. Once again, my name is Dan Salerno. The newsletter is Documentary Business. You can find it on documentarybusiness.com. And I hope you tune in and check it out. And thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, wherever you may be.
Thank you, Dan. Wonderful moderating. And I'm honored that you work with us. And thank you, Liz. So great to have you on board.